Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. From the analysis section in the first topic, we'll try to analyze the persisting issue of biodiversity loss in the country, specifically in the urban areas, today specifically on the International Day for Biodiversity, which is celebrated on 22nd of May. Then in the second topic, we'll try to look at the various methods of poverty estimation in the country and what are the causes behind the persisting issue of poverty in the year of 2025. Then from the simplified section, we'll take up 5 news. We will not only try to simplify the news for you, but also provide the much important value addition, keeping in mind the approaching prelims and mains examination of 2025. So stay tuned. The editorial today highlights the prevailing issue of the biodiversity loss, especially in the urban areas, and provide for the way forward on the International Day for Biodiversity, which is today on 22nd of May. And this issue of biodiversity loss forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of environment conservation. So let's start our today's discussion by asking ourselves a very simple question, and that is, what do we mean by biodiversity? Biodiversity basically refers to the degree of variability which exists among the fauna and the flora living on the planet Earth, which are not only essential for the well-being of us humans but also for the larger ecosystem on the planet as well. Taking cognizance of this importance, there was Convention on Biological Diversity which was signed on 22nd of May 1992, and that's why we celebrate the International Day for Biodiversity today, back in the Earth Summit which took place at Rio de Janeiro in the year of 1992. Is there any UN member state which has not ratified this very important Convention on Biological Diversity? The answer is yes. The same country which has also very recently pulled out from the Paris Agreement as well as has stopped funding to the World Health Organization. The name of the country is United States of America. So what does this Convention on Biological Diversity actually deals with? So it has 3 basic aims. First is the conservation of these important genetic resources of flora and fauna, the sustainable use of them, as well as the equitable sharing of the benefits which are arising from the genetic resources of such flora and fauna. Thus, this Convention on Biological Diversity has 2 important protocols. The first is the Cartagena Protocol. The Cartagena Protocol is basically an international treaty which deals with the transnational movement of the living modified organisms from one nation to another, and these living modified organisms are nothing but the product of the use of the modern day biotechnology. For example, you guys might have heard about the genetically modified cotton which we use, which is actually resistant to the soil bacterium of Bolgard 1 and Bolgard 2. The Bolgard 1 and Bolgard 2 which were also asked as the question in the prelims PYQ. Then there is Nagoya Protocol which basically deals with the equitable sharing of the benefits which are being derived from the genetic resources of such flora and fauna. Remember that this year themes for International Day for Biodiversity is harmony with nature and the sustainable development. So under this framework of Convention on Biological Diversity, there is this global biodiversity framework which was adopted called as Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Keep one thing in mind. You guys might have heard about the Conference of Parties for the Climate Change which takes place annually. However, the Conference of Parties for Convention on Biological Diversity that takes place biannually, basically meaning once in the span of 2 years. So for example, the COP15 which was this Montreal in Canada that took place in the year of 2022. Then there was your COP16 which took place in 2024 in Cali, Colombia, and the COP17 which is about to take place in the country Armenia in the year of 2026. So what does this Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework stands for? It basically aims to conserve 30% of the terrestrial and the marine biodiversity areas by the year of 2030, and thus 30 into 30 target. So for that purpose, it has basically set 4 important goals and 23 important HE biodiversity targets. The basic principle is that we need to take up such important biologically diverse areas and put them under the framework of the protected areas by the government. So for example, in our country, we have national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, Ramsar site. So let's say, for example, if there is a very biologically diverse area in the Western Ghat, we need to bring that under the fold of the protection by the government, under the fold of the national park or the wildlife sanctuaries. Currently, there exists 16% such globally biodiversity diverse areas which are under the protection of the protected areas by the government. The target is to enhance it to the 30% by the year of 2030. And the target is to reduce the risk from the pesticide by 50% by 2030, to stop the extinction of the known species by 2050 and further reduce the pollution risk and global footprint of the consumption. A question here to all of you. Is it legally binding on the governments? Absolutely not. So all these targets which we are discussing, it is completely voluntary in the nature because the Convention on Biological Diversity is not a legally binding treaty. The idea is that what is the status of biodiversity in India then? So for that purpose, let's refer to the INSV Stats Report 2022 released by the Ministry of Environment, which tells us that even though India has only 2.4% of the total surface area of the world, we hold 7 to 8% of the world's recorded species, thus making us the 8th highest mega biodiverse country in the world. For example, in our country, we have 1,03,258 species of fauna. And just look at the endemic species, the species which are found only in our country. For example, 645 species of protozoans are endemic to our country. 27,000 and more invertebrates are only found in our country. 500 such species of fishes, 255 of reptilia, 81 such species of birds are found nowhere else in the world. Similarly, when it comes to the diversity in the flora as well, we host 55,048 species, and remember 21% of this, which basically means 12,095 such species of flora are found only in our country, or they are basically endemic. For example, you guys might have heard about rhododendron trees, or for example Brahm Kamal flower. So they are found only in our country itself. And thus, to protect this existing level of biodiversity, the government has created various biosphere reserves, 12 of which then forms the part of World Network of Biosphere Reserves, which are very important for your prelims perspective. So just have a look at them, that in which state they are present. For example, one year they ask about this particular Agast Malya Biosphere Reserves, and these biosphere reserves consist of various national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. So have a look at them as well. Now coming to the kind of the protected areas which we have in our country to protect this biodiversity. So for example, we are referring to the Indian State of Forest report which was released this year. It told us that how there exist more than 106 national parks, 564 wildlife sanctuaries, 218 community reserves and 99 conservation reserves. However, when we refer to the marine protected areas, the number is actually very less. Similarly, on the very same line, the report also highlights that there is taking place biodiversity loss in the country, which is also acting as a kind of a deterrent to the genetic evolution of our flora and fauna as well. So we are basically losing a lot of important ecosystem services because of the biodiversity loss which is taking place. And as per the today's editorial, the rate is of 25% of the flora and fauna. They face extinction by the year of 2050 itself. What are the causes behind it? The first and foremost is obviously the anthropogenic factor. That is nothing but the habitat loss of this flora and fauna, and that is majorly caused by the deforestation. Just look at the rate of the deforestation. India has lost more than 6,68,000 hectares of the forest cover in the last 30 years, thus making us the second highest rate of deforestation among the countries worldwide in the last 3 decades. And why this deforestation is taking place? For the purpose of mining, for the purpose of industrial expansion, or for example to create living space for our increasing population. Correct? So that basically means concretization and urbanization itself. For example, you guys might have heard recently, it was in the news, that how some very important elephant corridors in the region of Chota Nagpur Plateau were completely destroyed for the purpose of mining. Then exists the issue of invasive alien species, which starts fighting for the limited resources with the native species and alter the habitat structure altogether. For example, very recently we heard about such invasive species of Lantana camara, or for example water hyacinth, which were prevalent in the Bhitar Kanika mangroves. Bhitar Kanika mangroves, which is in the state of Odisha and is also a very important Ramsar site altogether. Then obviously, if you guys are reading the newspaper, you guys might have come across the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6th Assessment Report, which basically tells us that how there is a temperature rise of 1.2 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial level. And this increasing temperature is also very difficult for this flora and fauna to adopt, because they have lived millions of years with the same temperature and have adopted them in those conditions. For example, such increasing temperature or sea surface temperature leads to the coral polyps completely expelling the zooxanthellae, which is basically an algae. And that leads to what? A phenomena of coral bleaching. These coral reefs are considered to be the rainforest of the sea, because of the kind of the habitation which they provide for the marine species. So for this example, these coral reefs, they provide habitation to the 25% of the marine species across the world. The next such issues are, for example, the overexploitation of resources, or for example, the release of hot discharge in the water, which basically kind of alter the marine structure altogether, the pollutant discharge. Look, for example, here the discharge of untreated effluents into the canals pollutes the water in the borewells in the Chennai. So obviously leading to the kind of the complete destruction of the biodiversity in those particular area. The idea is, the editorial suggests that all of this is happening because of the diversion of such important biodiversity reasons for the economic purposes. And thus the article suggests that there exists the importance of preserving such biodiversity loss in urban areas, because these areas itself has a lot of economic things to offer. So it first of all tells that how this Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework has a specific target 12, which actually aims to create more blue and green spaces in the urban cities. Or for example, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal Target 11 actually aims for creation of sustainable cities with lot of such green and blue spaces. The article today also highlights that how, as per the World Bank's estimate, 70% of the world population is going to live in these cities by the year of 2050. Thus, kind of conserving this biodiversity becomes much more important. Then when we refer to the India State of Forest Report 2023, first of all, it tells us that we had set ourselves a kind of a target. That was the national reforestation target which we have set, that we are going to have 33% of our area under the tree and forest cover. However, if you look at to the Indian State of Forest Report 2023, currently the total forest and tree cover stands only at 25% of the geographical area. Also, such forest and tree cover in the 6 mega cities, like for example Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Delhi, Bombay, Chennai, that is only 10% of the total geographical area of these cities, comprising to only 511 km square. And the city which is having the largest forest cover among all of this stands out to be Delhi. And in the last decade itself, from 2011 to 2023, these cities have experienced 20 to 30% loss of forest and tree cover. Thus, there might come a time when these cities are going to be completely devoid of such green and blue spaces altogether. On the other hand, the article suggests that we need to conserve this biodiversity because it is going to provide us various benefits. For example, obviously the provisional services of food, fiber, water. Also, it can actually minimize the urban heat island effect. What is urban heat island effect? So let's say, for example, if we look at the periphery of the cities, that's where we can actually find some trees in today's time. This is basically the concretized land altogether, the large scale sky reaching buildings. The idea is that the temperature in these areas are actually higher in comparison to these peripheral areas, thus creating a kind of an urban heat island. The article today gives the example of the city of Frankfurt in Germany, which actually started employing various kind of green belts in the cities, and that led to the reduction of 3.5 degrees Celsius of the temperature of the city altogether. Second is it can also help us in flood control. For example, the flood which took place recently in the Bangalore, so that can be conserved as well, because the deep roots of the tree, they can actually hold the soil, so they doesn't let the landslides take place when the flood is taking place. And as well as for the water conservation as well. All of these green leaves will provide for what? For the sequestration of the carbon, and thus lead to the kind of abatement of pollution as well. The idea is that the article suggests that it is completely for us to choose that we are going to live in the concrete jungles, or we are going to actually create such green spaces which are going to create or provide the space for various kind of recreational activities as well. Ultimately, a New York college study has also told that such afforestation can lead to the value of annual services of around rupees 8 crore in a particular city. So there are various kind of ecosystem services which are being provided by this forest, including the fauna as well, and thus we need to preserve them on immediate basis. So what are the steps which has been taken by the government of India? First and foremost, the government has launched Green Credit Program. So under which we are going to create afforestation in the various kind of degraded forest land. For this purpose, there is a kind of a compensatory afforestation program which has been also launched in the Forest Conservation Act of 2023. The idea is that following the guidelines in the T.N. Godvarman judgment of 1996 of the Supreme Court, whenever there is an industry which is clearing any land for the industry use, clearing them of the forest, the industry shall provide or is liable to pay the fine. And such compensation actually goes to this compensation for afforestation management. And that is basically going to direct this fund to the various state governments for the purpose of afforestation. Then under the Green India Mission, the target is to create forest on new or barren 5 million hectare of land. And on already existing such 5 million hectare of land where we have forest but in degraded condition, we need to improve their quality as well. The Ministry of Tribal Affairs has also recognized the kind of the economic importance of these forests, and thus has come with the Van Dhan Yojana, under which we are basically creating Vikas Dhan Kendras, where the idea is that the various self-help groups, including the tribals, will come and try to promote the various products under the minor forest produce, which the kind of the people living in the forest can have access to under the Forest Rights Act of 2006 as well. Then under the Nagar Van Yojana, the idea is for the urban afforestation altogether. Also, the article today suggests that we need to focus much more upon the social engineering concept as well, where the people shall be made aware to do this afforestation. For that purpose, there was a kind of an initiative which was led by our Honorable Prime Minister last year, where he launched this initiative of Ek Ped Maa Ke Naam as well. Here, it is very important to mention Tulsi Govda as well, who is considered as the mother of trees, a person who actually throughout her life ended up planting 1 lakh trees in the region of Karnataka. So that can be a very good example as well. The article today suggests that there can be certain way forwards which can be adopted, and the first and foremost is to create a city biodiversity index for all the major cities of our country to actually have idea about the persisting loss which is taking place. So first accumulate the kind of the ecosystem services which are being provided by the existing biodiversity and the loss which is about to take place, only then we can take some kind of recourse. And for that purpose, using this city biodiversity index, we will do what? We will create local biodiversity strategy and action plan. So basically the localization of the sustainable development goal, which is being suggested by the various United Nations platforms as well. The article today suggests that how the Miyawaki model of urban afforestation shall be discarded and gives the example of Coimbatore model, which basically worked with kind of growing the trees, not planting the ready-made trees taking from somewhere, rather creating the grassroots level infrastructure for the tree growth, and thus creating the 3 layer of trees which actually exist in the forest over a course of a time, which is also a sustainable process as well. The idea which article today suggests that there shall be a target of 1 million trees in 5 years target, and this shall be given to all the smart cities across the country. And here the role of urban local bodies becomes very important as well, because it is them who can take the grassroots level effort and kind to try to sensitize the people around as well. So keep all of these suggestions in the mind, try to attempt this particular question, and we move forward to the next news. The article today throws light on the data gaps which actually persist in the terms of poverty estimation in the country and the immediate reforms which are required. This issue of persisting poverty forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the theme of issues of poverty and poverty elimination. So let's first try to understand that what do we mean by the term poverty. Does there exist any kind of uniform definition of it which is actually have global acceptance? The answer is no. The World Bank basically defines poverty to a person who has kind of low income, and this low income kind of incurs an inability on the person that person cannot be able to access the goods and the services which are actually required for the kind of the holistic development of the individual. However, if we refer to the kind of definition which has been given by the Nobel Prize economist Amartya Sen, he completely discards that poverty is solely related to this income perspective itself. Rather, he defines poverty as a kind of an incapability which is imposed upon the people by the governments, whether the person is unable to achieve or kind of realize his optimum potential or full potential in the life altogether. The idea is that the today's debate is actually revolving around a report which has been published called as Poverty Decline in India after 2011 to 12, where the report first and foremost highlights that India has no official poverty estimate since the year of 2011. So the last official definition or the estimation of the poverty actually stands with the Tendulkar Committee report of 2011. The current data which we have is the kind of the poverty index which is released by the Niti Aayog, according to which the poverty level has fallen from 37% in 2004 to 18% by 2023, which basically means that if we refer to the kind of the poverty line which was established by the Tendulkar Committee, according to that line which was set 12 years back, currently we have 18 people who still fall in the below poverty line in the year of 2023 out of 100. So what was the estimation which was done by the Tendulkar Committee in 2011? The Tendulkar Committee basically kind of estimated, and it took the consumption expenditure by an individual on certain basket of good which is very necessary or important for the survival of an individual. So such basket of goods, let's say for example, comprises of various kind of cereals, pulses, fruits, vegetables, horticulture basically. Also on the basic skills which are required for any kind of growth in the life, for example education, your good health, or for example any kind of expenditure on the purpose of entertainment as well. Remember that this consumption expenditure by an individual also includes the private expenditure done on health and education as well. So on the basis of that, the Tendulkar Committee basically set a kind of a uniform poverty line. That was that if there is an individual who is spending 27 rupees a day in the rural areas and 33 rupees a day in the urban areas, then that particular person will be considered to be falling below the poverty line. So if you are spending 27 rupees below poverty line, above that, let's say for example even 28 rupees per day, you will not be considered to be falling in the below poverty line as per the government. The idea is that if we take a kind of a rough estimate of the monthly expenditure, in the rural areas it will stand around 860 rupees or something, and in the urban areas around 1000 rupees. Now if we compare this to the international standard which has been set by the World Bank basically tells us that a person who is spending $1.9 a day is considered to be poor. So that basically in the today's currency, as per the exchange ratio, it will come around to be 160 rupees. So just look at the stark difference on the basis of which we are actually kind of calculating the poverty estimation in our country. Even with such low levels, as per the Tendulkar Committee, 21% of the population in the year of 2011 was actually falling below the poverty line. The article today suggests that if the expenditure on the consumption itself can become a criteria, the most recent data which we have is of the household consumption expenditure of 2023-2024, according to which the monthly per capita expenditure in the rural area stands at around 4,122 rupees and in urban areas stands at 6,996 rupees. Basically, out of this, let's say for example in rural area, out of this 4,122 rupees, 47% of the income is actually going to just feed the family itself or on food. Even in urban areas, 39% of the share of the monthly per capita expenditure is directed towards nothing but buying the food itself. So let's take an example here. Let's say that I have a earning of 100 rupees a month. Out of this 100 rupees, if I am spending 47 rupees just to feed my family, do you guys think I will have enough money to kind of enroll my daughter in any international school for good education for her future? No. Can I just enroll her in any kind of very expensive coaching so that she can also avail some good government job? Nahi. That basically means, or this basically translates to, that if the majority of the expenditure is actually kind of being directed toward the food itself, I will be completely incapable of providing any kind of skill accumulation to my future generation, right? And that becomes the major issue. The third is that, okay, if we want to have a kind of a much more holistic coverage of the kind of the poverty which exists in our country, we can also refer to the multi-dimensional poverty index 2023, which is released by the United Nations Development Program, where there are much more holistic indicators. For example, the level of nutrition, the child mortality, the years of schooling, the kind of the expenditure which is being done on cooking fuel, the sanitation, drinking water, access to electricity, housings, etc. So when we compare all of that, as per the multi-dimensional poverty index of 2023, India's 18% of the population in the year of 2023 was falling as a multi-dimensionally poor population that basically comprised of 23 crore people. The question which shall come in our mind is that even in the year of 2025, what are the causes of such persisting poverty in our country despite the various estimates of the declining poverty rates? The first and foremost is the jobless growth which has incurred. So for example, also because of the impact of the pandemic which took place, there took place a kind of a K-shaped recovery. And this K-shaped recovery basically kind of accumulated to the various kind of job layoffs which took place in various industries. So that basically means that if I'm not earning well, obviously my propensity to consume will decline. And if the propensity to consume of the larger population has declined, it's very obvious that the manufacturing output will decline as well. That basically means that no more job is being created. At the very same time, there is persisting high level of inflation, and because of that, the nominal GDP is increasing. So that's what we can see in our budget 2025 itself. In budget 2025, the nominal GDP growth rate is 10%. However, you guys can refer that how in the last session we were discussing about the monthly labor force survey, according to which the unemployment rate is also as high as 5% across the country. That is exactly what the today's report showcases as well. It says that the GDP growth between 2011 to 23, if we compare it to the previous decade of 2002 to 2011, in that decade, the total growth rate was around 7%. On real GDP. However, in the terms of real GDP, the growth rate in 2011 to 23 has only 5.7%, and thus there is also slower decline in the poverty level as well. The second is what is taking place is the mechanization of the labor force because of the integration of the artificial intelligence, big data analytics, machine learning. So the industry is basically transforming into the industry 5.0, and that is also leading to the kind of the large scale job layoffs. Because it is very obvious that if the same work can be done by the machines at a much minimal cost, why you guys will employ a larger workforce? The corporation will obviously look at the larger profit making. The idea is that, let's say for example, there existed a kind of a job of a person who was coming to you and delivering news to you on daily basis. And by doing a lot of analysis of various reports like World Bank reports and all of that. But if the same person's job can be done by the artificial intelligence by analyzing all the reports by you and delivering to you, and you can listen to that as well, audible as well, with a lot of infographics and diagrams made by you, then it is very obvious that this particular job is also under danger. And that is exactly what has happened as well. A lot of large scale job layoff has taken place. And that has led to a kind of a huge competition in the market. So if the jobs are less, unemployment is more, unemployed population is more, it's very obvious that the people will kind of, try to agree to work at a meager cost itself. The idea is that the wage rate growth has actually fell by 2.3% per year in the last decade. So if the wage is falling, don't you think that the propensity to consume will simultaneously decline? Again, low manufacturing output, the more job layoffs, and that will become a kind of a vicious cycle of unemployment altogether. So some of you will suggest that, sir, what we can do is we can kind of skill this population for the industry 5.0, train them in artificial intelligence, machine learning. Absolutely brilliant idea, and this is where another problem emerges. So as per the periodic labor force survey 2022 to 23, 86% of the working age population in between 15 to 59 years does not have any vocational training at all. So there exists a huge gap between the industry requirement and the skill set offered, a huge mismatch. And all of this basically leads to what? The vicious cycle of poverty. So if I don't have job, it's obviously the idea is that I'm not going to focus much more upon the nutrition, health and education of my children. That will basically lead to the less skill accumulation among them. That will basically lead to a kind of a less retention capacity or working capability among them. That will dent the kind of a demographic dividend of them in the future as well, and this vicious cycle of poverty will continue. And because of this large scale unemployment and poverty, there is much more labor force which is now diverting towards agriculture itself, which is already have a lot of fragmentation. So 68 million workers have been added in agriculture sector since 2017-18. And all of these issues are also reflecting at various international parameters. For example, our abysmal ranking in the Global Hunger Index 2024, where we ranked 105 out of 127, and in Human Development Index, where we ranked 134 out of 193 countries. The task for you all is just comment down in the comment box by your pure memory basis who releases Global Hunger Index and which organization releases Human Development Index. So these are the persistent causes. So what are the steps taken by the government of India in this regard? First and foremost, there is a kind of a Pradhan Mantri Employment Generation Program which has been launched, where through first of all we have tried of putting all the people who are seeking the employment, the industry, the government institutions like public sector units at one platform of National Career Service Portal, NCS. Through this, there is a kind of an employment generation which we are trying to seek. At the same time, under this employment generation program, there is a lot of impetus on traditional artisans to kind of skill them. That is also being done under the Kaushal Vikas Yojana as well, the whole skilling initiative which the government has launched. Then the government is also providing collateral-free loans to create kind of more self-employment and to make these people kind of instead only seeking the employment but also creating one at the grassroots level by providing collateral-free loans under Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana and Swanidhi scheme. The impetus on the indigenous goods and industries is obviously there under Make in India. And the further idea is to promote startups under Stand Up India, specifically from the SC, ST, women section, where the collateral-free loans are available from the corpus of 10 lakh rupees to 1 crore. The idea is to provide them a kind of hand-holding in the initial phases to kind of grow these startups. Also, the government is focusing upon the unorganized sector. So, kind of the first national level portal was created for the formalization of this unorganized worker force, bringing them on the e-Shram portal and kind of extending them the social security benefits under the Social Security Code of 2020, which was also asked in your mains examination 2024. The idea is that there was a very important scheme which the government launched in the budget 2024 called as Employment Linked Incentive Scheme, where the government said that, okay, if you are going to provide employment to certain people, we will provide monthly wage to all such employees entering in this formal sector if they have a salary of 1 lakh rupees per month or less. Also, these people will be provided compulsory online financial literacy course as well. Then under the scheme B, the government said that we will provide wage subsidy for the first timers. Additional employment shall be generated in the manufacturing sector, and 8 to 24% of incentives will be provided to both employer as well as employee. So the government is trying to boost the industry sector as well, that create employment. Don't worry about it. We are going to provide you a lot of subsidies. We are going to take care of the first few monthly wages. We will provide additional employment in all sectors, and we will also reimburse 3,000 rupees per month to the employer for providing the jobs. So the government is also kind of hand-holding the industries for creating the jobs as well. What can be the way forward in this regard? The first and foremost is to focus much more upon the capital infrastructure and much more investment in that, in the sectors of the future of health, education, the various sunrise sector, for example, the solar panels, the photovoltaic modules, the electric vehicles. In these areas, the future jobs can be created. Second, the Make in India shall also have a much larger idea for Make for the world as well. So if we can also create an indigenous brand, let's say for example just like Adidas, which provides you good quality, styled as well as much more shoes in a kind of a very comfortable range for the larger customers which can buy, why we cannot try to take over the global market altogether? The third is to strengthen the MSME sector for this, from where such products, such unicorns, such startups can actually emerge. And also we should stop looking at agriculture only as a kind of a primary sector, but the kind of the various food processing opportunities which prevails there. The idea is to create much more agricultural based industries. And at the same time, the article today basically suggests that there shall be a uniform parameter for poverty estimation in our country as well, because we are currently calculating our poverty on the level of 2011. So that is quite backdated. We need to update that as well. Keep all of these arguments in your mind and suggestions in your mind and try to attempt this question. We move forward to the next news, where we are going to read about a very interesting case of K. Veeraswami. The backdrop to this is actually recently the Vice President said that the in-house inquiry which has been ordered by the Supreme Court into the unaccounted cash which was actually found at the Justice Yashwant Verma, it does not have any constitutional premise or legal sanctity, and thus sought an FIR against the judge. At the same time, the Vice President also suggested for revisiting the Supreme Court's K. Veeraswamy judgment, which he said he's erected a kind of a scaffolding of impunity around the judiciary. So to understand that, let's first try to understand about the principle of the independence of the judiciary. The idea is that the Supreme Court has been kind of established as the highest court of appeal and also the protector of the fundamental rights of the people under Article 13 and 32 of the Constitution. Thus, the judiciary shall be completely devoid of any kind of encroachment from both Parliament as well as executive. So to ensure that, there are certain conditions which has been provided by the Constitution itself to ensure the independent functioning of the judiciary, such as for example the mode of appointment, where the Supreme Court judges are appointed by the President within the consultation within the judiciary itself. So here you guys can actually recall the third judge's case of 1998 which we were discussing, where there is a kind of a collegium which is established consisting of CJI plus 4 senior most judge of the Supreme Court who give advice to the President about the appointment of the next judge. Then there is separation from the executive, which is basically a kind of a directive principle of state policy itself under Article 50 of the Constitution. So it was for this purpose, if you guys can recall, the National Judicial Appointment Commission, which was established by the government under 99th Constitutional Amendment Act, that was basically held unconstitutional by the judiciary. They said that the executive is trying to encroach upon the appointment procedure of the judges. The third is the fixed services condition which has been provided by the Constitution itself, where the salary, the various allowances, the pensions, the privileges, all of them are actually regulated by the Parliament. And remember that this cannot be changed into the disadvantage of the judge after his appointment. Any such changes can be made only when financial emergency has been imposed under Article 360 of the Constitution. The next is the expenses. All of these are charged on the consolidated fund of India, and that basically means that they are non-votable by the Parliament altogether. At the same time, the conduct of judges cannot be discussed in the Parliament related to any case unless and until there is a kind of an impeachment motion which is under the procedure in the Parliament. Now the question which shall arise in your mind is that what is impeachment motion? So remember that the removal of judge, there is also a kind of a procedure which has established by the Constitution itself under Article 124, which basically says that a judge can be removed by the President only if such order has been passed by the Parliament to the President. And this whole procedure is basically regulated by the Judges Inquiry Act of 1968. Under which, let's say for example, first of all, there is a kind of a removal motion for the impeachment of the Chief Justice or the judges of Supreme Court that can be taken up only by the 100 members in Lok Sabha and 50 members in Rajya Sabha. Then this impeachment motion will go to the Speaker. A Speaker can act exactly like your crush when you go to your crush with the proposal. Just like your crush, the Speaker can say, no, I am not interested, I am sorry. Or the Speaker can say that yes, I am interested, admit the motion. Good news for you, bad news for the judge of the Supreme Court. So what will happen? It will go to a 3-member committee which will be created by the Speaker of the House itself, which will consist of Chief Justice of India or any judge of Supreme Court, Chief Justice of High Court, as well as any distinguished jurist. And if this committee held that yes, indeed, the judge is guilty of misbehavior or incapacity. So remember, there are only 2 grounds which are given in the Constitution for the impeachment of any judge of the Supreme Court. That is misbehavior or incapacity. And obviously, as like everything, Constitution has not defined these 2 terms as well. So if this committee held that yes, indeed, judge is guilty of misbehavior or incapacity, then this motion will go back again to both the houses, and both the houses shall pass this motion by special majority. That basically means the majority of the total membership, and not the member present and voting, the total membership, as well as the majority of 2/3 of the member who are present there and voting. After this motion is passed, then it will go to the president, and now president can pass an order to remove the judge. What does the article today says? It says that the mechanism which we have just saw, it actually ensured that the Chief Justice of India sets up a panel of judges to verify if there is a prima facie case against a judge or not. Thus, the finding of this panel too has to go to the executive for the impeachment to be initiated, the whole process of passing it with the special majority. It is at best a signal that the judiciary itself is on board with the impeachment motion if it were to be made, because it is the 3-member committee which comprises of the complete judiciary itself who will decide that whether the judge is guilty of misbehavior or incapacity or not. Correct? So it is a kind of a very closed system. There exists no transparency altogether. What is this curious case of K. Veeraswami? So what happened that J. Veeraswami went on leave after the allegation of corruption surfaced against him, and it was basically said that he has got a very small amount of 6,41,461 rupees, which was basically not to be the known source of income. Incidentally, Justice V. Ramaswamy, who in 1993 actually became the first judge to face impeachment proceedings, was also the son-in-law of the Justice Veeraswamy as well. And Ramaswamy was elevated as a judge of Madras High Court in 1971, just 2 years after when Veeraswamy became the Chief Justice. So FIR against the Justice Veeraswamy raised larger constitutional question on whether such a step could be initiated against a sitting judge or not. And this question then went to the Supreme Court under the appeal, the appellate jurisdiction of Supreme Court, that whether a judge is considered to be a public servant under the Prevention of Corruption Act 1947 or not. The government said that unlike the president and governor who has been provided constitutional immunity under Article 361 of the Constitution, no such immunity has been provided for the judges of higher court. Thus, the Supreme Court held a kind of a Madhyam Marg ruling, took a kind of a middle path, where the Supreme Court said that yes, indeed, judge is a public servant under the Prevention of Corruption Act 1947, but to register a case against the sitting judge, the sanction must always come from the Chief Justice of India, and that is exactly what has happened right now as well. At the same time, the Supreme Court held a very important quote which you guys can include in the mains answer, that there exists no employer-employee relation between the judge and the president. So the idea is that is such encroachment by the executive into the judiciary, can that be considered as a completely liable process? The idea is that there is an importance of independent judiciary. So in our constitution, there exists no strict separation of power, which was basically envisaged by the Montesquieu, the thinker Montesquieu, who believed that there shall be kind of a complete separation between the 3 important organs of the governance, that is legislature, executive and judiciary. However, in our constitution, there is a kind of a checks and balance system which has been created. For example, the executive, the legislature can kind of remove executive by passing a no confidence motion. At the same time, the executive, the council of ministers, they can resign and dissolve the legislature. Or for example, the legislature can impeach the judiciary under the Article 124. At the same time, the judiciary can kind of hold legislature accountable for the laws which they have made under the Judicial Review Article 32. Similarly, it is the executive, the president, who appoint the judiciary, and at the same time, it is the judiciary which can issue various kind of writs to protect the fundamental right of the people under Article 32 of the Constitution. The idea is to create a system of checks and balances to actually enhance the accountability and equality under Article 14 of the Constitution and to ensure the further rule of law. We can take a case study of, let's say here for example, the Great Nicobar project which was recently in the news. where the government is building various kind of large transshipment ports, or the government is trying to build the great infrastructure there to kind of promote the Great Nicobar as the kind of the future place for tourism. The Niti Aayog report itself says that for such large scale infrastructure creation, 9.5 lakh trees will be kind of cut off. The large scale deforestation will take place. At the same time, as we were discussing about the biodiversity loss in the beginning, don't you think that the rare species like leatherback turtle, their population can also get hampered as well? So the idea is that in this case, if we have got committed judiciary, that will completely turn kind of a blind eye to all the actions which are being taken by the executive on the name of the development. So in this case, you don't need an kind of a committed judiciary. You need an independent judiciary to kind of protect your fundamental rights, to ensure the rule of law, for power decentralization and provide the voice to the people. So keep these arguments in your mind. We move forward to the next news, where we'll try to understand a very important article which has featured today, which talks about the intensification of cyclones which can take place because of the rising global warming. A kind of on the line of the question which was also asked in your mains examination. The idea is that let's first try to understand the formation of the cyclone. The basic concept is that, let's say for example, on the sea surface in the Bay of Bengal, there is existing a high temperature. Let's say it is much more above than 27 degrees Celsius. So that this sea surface will warm up. Because of the warming up, a lot of electrons, neutrons, the various photons, they will kind of collide with each other. A lot of energy will be created. Because of that energy, a lot of particles, they will start moving up, right? Because they have now become electrically charged. Because of that, there will be take place what? The kind of an upliftment of the warm air. And when this warm air rises, it will lead to what? A kind of a deficit air in this particular region. So that will basically lead to what? A low pressure area. And if we follow the simple law of the pressure gradient force, it basically tells us that air anywhere from the high pressure area, it moves to the low pressure area, as simple as that. The idea is that when this air is coming from all the direction to fill this low pressure area, they will start colliding with each other. At the same time, you guys also might have heard about the Coriolis force, which is basically caused because of the rotation of the earth. So because of the rotation of the earth, there will take place a kind of a deflection towards the right side in the northern hemisphere, and thus this air will start circulating in the anti-clockwise rotation and they will start rising. So now there is a kind of a circulation which has caused because of the Coriolis force, and the air is rising because it is a warm air. And as the air will rise, the simple law is what? That as the altitude increases, the temperature of the air will start declining. And that is basically called as what? The normal lapse rate. That is basically 6.5 degrees Celsius per kilometer. So that will lead to what? Basically the condensation or the formation of various cumulonimbus clouds. Thus, there will take place a kind of a huge upper divergence area is required. Large scale sea surface temperature is required for the formation of cyclone. Over a course of time, the cyclone will take place a kind of a shape like this, where there will exist eye in the center, right, where there is the largest disturbance which is taking place. The eye walls will take place from where the divergence will take place across the outer surface over the troposphere. From the tropopause, there will also be a subsiding warm air which will come. There will be these rain bands which consist of cumulonimbus and the nimbus clouds as well. And this cyclone will make the landfall. So it will dissipate when it will land, kind of reach to the coast of our country. So this is the complete idea. The article today suggests that there are various conditions for the formation of cyclones, which are also given in your basic NCERT. It tells us that we require large sea surface with temperature above 27 degrees Celsius. Then for the deflection of wind, for the cause of the rotation and leading to the rise in the above troposphere, the presence of Coriolis force is required. There shall also be a small variation in vertical wind speed as well as pre-existing low pressure area, a weak low pressure area, as well as the upper divergence above the sea as well. The reasons which has been cited by today's article for the intensification of cyclone, it says that there exists a kind of a radiative force of 2.6 watt per meter square, which is actually required to keep the global warming as per the Paris Agreement target. So under the Paris Agreement target, we have basically said that we are going to limit the temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the 21st century, that is 2100. As IPCC report, we have already reached to 1.2 degrees Celsius. This is basically saying that the radiating force of 2.6 watt per meter square is if we can maintain up to that, then we'll be able to kind of achieve the Paris Agreement target. But the current radiative force or the extra energy because of the release of the heat from the Earth's surface itself, that is 2.7 watt per meter square. Thus, the article says that there are various socio-economic pathways called as SSP 5, 7, 8. Currently, we are at SSP 5, where we are burning fossil fuel and depleting the natural resources. Thus, roughly half of the world's mangrove will be at high risk by 2100. Coastal ecosystem protect inland areas from storms, reduce soil erosion, store carbon. Mangroves in particular, they can store 4 to 5 times more carbon per unit area than these terrestrial forests. Keep these important facts in your mind for the prelims examination. The idea is that there is a decline of these mangrove forests as well, if you refer to the Indian State of Forest Report 2023. Thus, the idea is that the model founds of the world that the world's 844 ecoregions, 290 are already affected by such increasing number of tropical cyclone. And the time which was available for the recovery from this cyclone, that has also been dropped from earlier 19 years to 12 years now. And the bulk of this shift is taking place in countries like East Asia, Central America, Caribbean regions as well. Madagascar and Oceania are increasingly at risk. The idea is that currently we are at what? SSP 5, Socio-Economic Pathway 5. But if we reach to Socio-Economic Pathway 8.5, the scenario is going to just completely change altogether. What is Socio-Economic Pathway 8? That basically deals with that when there is a complete anarchy in the world. When the people have become kind of gone out of control from the hold of the government, and thus there is a kind of a vast scale exploitation of the natural resources which are taking place. So in that case, obviously we are going to completely breach the Paris Agreement target altogether. So the article suggests that we require long-term recovery time in risk assessment in addition to the damage caused by cyclone, and risk-sensitive conservation planning. Use these keywords in your answer. And include decision-making process that explicitly consider the shifting disturbances regimes. Take it. So what our government has done so far when it comes to the kind of the risk mitigation by the cyclones, considering the vast coastline which we have. If anyone can comment down what is the current measure of our coastline. The idea is we have launched National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project. Then we have created a very comprehensive coastal zone management program. We have divided on the basis of various high tide line and low tide line the various coastal regulation zone, where in the specific CRZ1 and CRZ2 any kind of industrial construction, large scale construction is completely prohibited. Then in the budget 2024, the government came up with MISTI program, under which we are trying to improve the mangrove habitation on the coastal range to kind of create a natural barrier across the state as well. Then there is a kind of an early warning system which has been developed by inquiries to kind of provide for early sensitization of the masses, of the public, of the administration as well, for the early purpose of rehabilitation. So keep all of these things in your mind, keep the specific data in your mind, and we move forward to the next news, where we'll try to understand a new idea which has emerged in the Donald Trump's mind. And the idea now is of a golden dome. So what is golden dome? Golden Dome is going to be another missile defense shield. So obviously the importance of this missile defense shield holds in the current warfare scenarios that was already tested when our dear neighbor was just trying to disturb us with some very prominent drones which they were sending, the drones which we basically used in our marriages, right? The idea is that such missile defense shield is of utmost importance. The USA is taking it to a kind of a one step further, where they are saying that it is inspired basically by the Israel's Iron Dome air defense system. But what is the difference? Trump says that the system would comprise, among other things, space-based sensors and interceptor, which will basically make the Golden Dome the very first truly space-based weapon system. The idea is that the use of space technology in defense has largely been restricted to reconnaissance, right? Where satellite basically provide crucial targeting and other data for earth-based weapon systems, as for example long-range missile, guided munition, etc. But this Golden Dome will introduce interceptor that will be launched from the space itself. And thus obviously it will lead to the further agglomeration of the satellites in the region of the space, because thousands of small satellites will orbit the earth, which will intercept an enemy missile moment after its launch altogether. What is this Israel's Iron Air Defense System, on which the inspiration has been taken by the USA to create this Golden Dome in the space now actually. The idea is that, let's say for example, there is an enemy rocket which has been fired. So there is a radar system which will detect these rockets and will start tracking them. Then it will send this information to a control system which will actually estimate that, okay, where it is going to impact. So for example, there was a missile which was launched for Hisar, Haryana, and the radar system actually kind of intercepted that okay, it is going to have impact this way. And then there exists a launcher fire missile to kind of intercept, and that will collide with it and explode, and that is something which was very visible to you when this war situation was taking place. What is the difference between the kind of the current defense system which exists for these missiles and this space-based missile defense system which is being launched by USA? The Iron Dome is basically a short-range, ground-based aerial defense system that primarily relies on radar and not satellite. It's not that we are not completely using satellite altogether, we are using them, but primarily we are relying on various radars. However, this Golden Dome system will have the main selling point that it will deployment of space-based system. Unlike the short-range defense that Iron Dome provides against relatively smaller and slower targets, the Golden Domes will be able to kind of defend against the intercontinental ballistic missile, the technology which is possessed by China and Russia, obviously the two main adversaries of USA. These intercontinental ballistic missiles can be launched from tens of thousands of kilometers away. So basically the China sitting from the Beijing can target Washington DC, that is the idea, and travel to space as a part of their flight trajectory, which we'll read here. Okay. So idea is that through this space defense system, creating of this Golden Dome, the USA will be able to neutralize using ground-based interceptor, space-based weapons, which have long been thought to be much more effective. What is the difference between the various cruise missile and these intercontinental ballistic missiles which we are discussing? The idea is that these cruise missiles are basically powered by jet engine throughout the journey. The ballistic missile first just get the initial push from the rocket, and after that it just follows a trajectory where it is going to fall upon the target. Second is that cruise missile relatively has a kind of a low altitude where they just basically do the kind of a contour maneuvering altogether. Ballistic missile has a kind of a ballistic trajectory where it first goes outward of the space and then comes and hit the target. Third is in the cruise missile there is a combination of more geo-positioning system and inertial guidance. However, in ballistic missile, satellite and GPS both are used, but majorly relying on satellite. In cruise missile, it is harder to detect but very easier to intercept. However, it is the complete opposite case in the ballistic missile, where it is easier to detect but harder to intercept due to the high speed and the kind of the high payload as well. Do India has cruise and ballistic missile both? The answer is yes. We have cruise missile like BrahMos, and we have ballistic missiles like, for example, Prithvi and Agni 5. Remember that India is a party to the Missile Technology Control Regime as well, which basically allows the country to develop a missile within a range of over 300 km and weighing more than 500 kg, but we cannot export it to the other countries. Keep this in mind. Take it. We move forward to the next news, where we are going to read about a kind of a sailing vehicle which has been developed called as Kaundinya. What is the story? Why this name particularly Kaundinya? The story actually goes to over 2000 years ago, where there was a kind of an Indian merchant vessel who was sailing across the Mekong Delta, that is the southern Vietnam of today. And on board of that particular merchant vessel was an Indian merchant named Kaundinya. The ship came under the attack from the pirates, so Kaundinya fought very bravely and kind of repulsed them. Then there was a kind of a local warrior queen whose name was Soma. She attacked and the Indian crew was outnumbered. But again, the Kaundinya fought very bravely, and ultimately, because of his bravery, as the luck would have it, the Soma fell in love with him, and they led to the foundation of the kingdom of the Funan. The kingdom of the Funan, which basically comprised of the modern day Cambodia, Thailand as well as Vietnam. So on the name of that great Indian merchant who actually set up this kingdom altogether in the Southeast Asia, the INSV, Indian National Sailor Vehicle, Kaundinya has been launched with the joint effort of Ministry of Culture and Indian Navy. Where remember that this particular sailing vessel has been constructed by using traditional method of stitching of the ship, and it is based upon the model of the ships which were depicted in the Ajanta caves. There are various symbols of ancient sculptures which has been also incorporated on this INSV Kaundinya. For example, Gand Bherunda and Simha Yali. A little bit information about Ajanta caves, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site and developed during the period of 2nd century BC to 5th century CE. Currently, in the state of Maharashtra, in the district Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, on the bank of which river? Vaghora river. In various books, you guys might have read that there are 29 caves, but the number has been increased because of the recent expeditions by the Archaeological Survey of India, where now it consists of 34 Buddhist caves only. So it is specific to only one religion, and it kind of experienced patronage from the Vakataka king Harisena, the Prime Minister Varahadev, under whom the major construction took place of this Ajanta cave, the local Gupta Upendra Gupta, as well as the Buddha Bhadra and Mathura Das. These were the prominent patrons of the Ajanta caves, and the specific caves has been mentioned as well. Remember that in Ajanta caves, we also see the influence of the art of Vengi and Vidarbh as well. And it has been mentioned by both the important Chinese traveler, Faxian, as well as Xuanzang. Xuanzang, who was in our country from 629 to 643 CE under the Pushya Bhuti dynasty ruler Harshvardhana. Can any one of you tell me this important traveler Faxian came under the reign of which Gupta ruler? Also, there are various important ports which are obviously the favorite of UPSC. For example, in one year they ask Korkai, Pumpuhar and Muchiri, the various important Sangam age ports. Similarly, one year they ask about the important Gupta age ports of Ghantasala, Kadura and Chaul. So all the important ports and along with their dynasties has been given there. So just read them very carefully, and we try to solve these questions also if possible, and we move forward to the last news of the day, where we are going to read about a book, and the name of the book is Heart Lamp. Why Heart Lamp is important? Because there is a Kannada writer, a lawyer and a social activist named as Banu Mushtaq, whose collection of 12 short stories, which she wrote from the year of 1990 to 2023, has actually been selected and has won the International Booker Prize for 2025 from a shortlist featuring books in the French, Italian, Danish and Japanese. Why it is so important? It is important because it is considered to be the first win for Kannada literature in the International Booker Prize, and the first time in the history that a collection of short stories has actually been honored. Before this, 3 years back in 2019, there was Gitanjali Sri who won the prestigious literary prize for Tom of Sand. A little bit of information about the Booker Prize. It was established in UK in the year of 1969, and it is awarded annually to the best work of fiction. So if you are writing on any very important social issue or something, you will not get this International Booker Prize. Take it. Open to writers worldwide and not only to Commonwealth nations. So keep this in mind as well. Also remember that the book must be written in English or translated in English and must be published in UK and Ireland. The price is actually very hefty, that is 50,000 euro. So after looking at this price, suddenly I have realized that there exists a kind of a fictional writer in me as well. Maybe I can write a book and give it a title, Meri Man Pasandida Aurat. And just comment if the title is actually suitable or not. And remember that the first Indian to win this International Booker Prize was V.S. Naipaul in the year of 1971 for the book named In a Free State. So with this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.